Andy Kaufman is not a comedian. He's a behavioral psychologist, a song and dance man, a wrestler, a puppeteer, an actor, and a prankster. To his colleagues, he's a legend. To his friends and family, he's Andy. To everyone still trying to understand his life and his work, he is a man on the moon. Welcome to Movie Friends. My name is Seth.
And I'm Michelle.
Today we're talking about Man on the Moon from 1999. Directed by Milos Forman. Written by Scott Alexander and Larry Karaszewski. Cinematography by Anastas and Mikos. Composed by R.E.M. Edited by Christopher Tellefson and Lindsay Klinsman. Costume design by Jeffrey Kurland. Starring Jim Carrey, Danny DeVito, Courtney Love, Paul Giamatti, and Jerry Lawler. Michelle, what's going on?
Hey, Seth. Welcome to Jim Lie. Is that what we're calling it?
Yes. Jim Lie. Yeah, Drew Carey lied was different. It sounds like Drew Carey.
Drew Carey.
Yeah. So Jim Lie, easier. Yeah.
Yes, Jim Lie. You're a liar.
Very exciting. Happy anniversary.
Thank you. Yes, today is my wedding anniversary. We've been married for 9 years, together for 16.
That's crazy.
I know. It's weird.
Wow. 16 years.
16 years. And this is actually our dating anniversary, too.
Wow, you got married on the dating anniversary.
Yep, sure did.
You doubled up on anniversaries.
Yeah, kind of worked out that way.
Was that
It's
on
nice.
purpose?
Kind of. We were like, hey, if we could get married on the 26th, that would be dope. And then Aunt proposed on the 26th, but in October. So 26 is kind of our number.
26. Okay. Do you know that Jim Carrey starred in a movie called The Number 23?
I did not know that.
It's about a guy who starts seeing like the number 23 everywhere and he becomes like obsessed and paranoid.
Wow.
Yeah. I was very excited because I thought maybe it was 26, but it wasn't.
That would have been so cool.
Speaking of obsession and Jim Carrey and Andy Kaufman, I can't wait to get into this discussion.
I know. I can't believe it.
This has been months in the making.
Really, though.
But before we get to that, we do have an email. Subject line is King of Con, and it says, Dr. Mario is probably my all-time favorite game.
Yes, with the pills.
Yes.
Yes. Wow. Haven't thought about that one in a while.
Dr. Mario
My aunt
rules.
had that game. I played that at her house along with Duck Hunt.
Billy is the worst. I wish someone would have punched him in the face.
Billy Mitchell.
I want a sequel. Hair Wars. P.S. Working at an arcade bar, I see people who will come in and play one game for hours. P.S.S. Maybe I should interview one of them. P.S.S.S. Socks are gross because they suck up everything from the shoe and the feet. This email is from Ben. Thank you, Ben.
Thank you, Ben. Hey, Seth, I have to go back to our sock foot discussion. I've been thinking about this all week.
I was jumping back into it too.
And I think last week when I was giving the case of how I felt a foot with a sock on is maybe better, for some reason, I was picturing that you would take your foot and put on a clean sock and then that would touch my face or the potato salad. But
oh, no.
No. Yeah. And I realized afterwards, I'm like, oh, that's not what Seth meant.
No.
So the sock is way worse.
Thank you very much. Okay.
You're very welcome.
All right. I was very heartened. I know that disheartened is a thing.
Yeah.
So I don't know if heartened is a thing, but I felt heartened this week because we put up the poll. What would you rather have touch your potato salad? A foot or a foot with a sock? And so far, the results are just about 50-50. I couldn't believe it.
I can't believe it. I was shocked at that. And I know you posted it on Twitter and I posted it on Instagram. And I'm like, I've been watching it. And I just can't believe how close those results are.
Yeah.
But then I really thought about it all week. I'm not kidding you. And I was like, wow, the sock is way worse.
The sock question has really brought everybody together.
Yeah. I wanted to respond to Ben's email as well.
Sure.
So there's an arcade, or I guess it's more pinball arcade bar opening in Patchogue.
Nice.
Yeah. And I think that you should totally interview those people. Make for some interesting conversation.
Definitely. Hey, if you want to be like Ben, send us an email, moviefriendspodcast@gmail.com. Especially if you watch some of the documentaries that we covered last month. Fun month. I'm just going to say it. Maybe an all-time theme, for the movies that we've done. I feel like we say that every month, though. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah, but you know what? I think last month might have been one of my favorites.
Me
And
too.
I definitely don't say that every month.
Definitely not, but it's few. I think it's few and far between.
Yeah, but really, I really enjoyed everything we did last month.
The arc that you and I have, episode to episode and month to month, is literally, okay, here we go. And then at the end, we're like, hey, wow, we did it. We did it.
We
I
are always
can't believe it.
Yeah.
I added up the other day all the episodes that I've done. So since December of 2022, I have done 203 episodes, including guest appearances, Patreon episodes, main show episodes. Still, after all this time, I don't know how to start an episode, end an episode.
Welcome to being a podcaster.
And each one, I'm like, okay, here we go.
Yeah. Hey, that's pretty great, though. That is no small feat. So congrats to you.
You know what else is no small feat? Guessing each other's ratings for a film, which is what we do before we start a discussion.
Uh-huh.
So I found my pencil again.
Oh, congrats. I have the mechanical one again.
You still have the
unfortunately.
mechanical one. Boo.
I hate it. Oh, it just broke.
Right. You're kidding me.
I'm not. I'm not even kidding you.
These two episodes have been the best indictment against mechanical pencils ever.
I hope
All
you're
right.
loving that.
So rating this movie, I think that you are going to rate this movie. I got my rating. Well, my guess.
Locked in.
It's locked in.
Locked in.
Before we watch a film for the first time, we record our pre-watch thoughts, and this was a first-time watcher for Michelle. So let's listen to what she had to say.
I am so excited that we are watching and discussing Man on the Moon this week. I was on an Andy Kaufman kick a couple of months ago when I was watching Taxi. And when I was a kid, my dad loved Taxi, and so when it was on late at night, repeats, if I was up, I would watch it with him, and I was so captivated by the character Laka. And so since I was rewatching the series, Laka brought back so many memories, and so then I started doing research on Andy Kaufman, and I texted Seth at one point, and I was like, do you think we'll ever do Man on the Moon? And he was like, yeah, it'll probably happen at some point. I was like, you know what? For Michelle, I'm going to put it on my list for the patrons to choose, because that's what we do. If you're a member of Movie Friends Patreon, the last movie of the month, the patrons get to choose from, and they get to vote. And so for Michelle, that was on my list, even though at that point I haven't seen it. But I was like, if people choose to watch it, that's great, and then we can discuss it. And so that's how much I've been wanting to watch this movie. I am so excited to dive into this and to just see Jim Carrey's portrayal of Andy Kaufman. I have never seen a trailer for this movie. I really have never seen scenes from it. So I'm really going in blind, even though I know it's about Andy Kaufman.
So when I say that this has been months in the making, that is the truth. We like to schedule out our months, 6 months to a year at a time. Gives us a good general guide of what we're doing. We can make sure that we're including different types of films and filmmakers, It's just good to know ahead of time, right? And then you started watching Taxi.
Yeah, I did.
So why don't you take it away?
Yeah, so as I said in my rewatch thought, I started watching Taxi kind of because, and I think I've said this in an earlier episode, maybe on Harvey, but in October is going to be 20 years since my dad passed away.
Wow.
And I've been feeling like I want to connect with him, and I'm trying to find avenues of just different ways to do that. And one of his favorite shows was Taxi.
Mm,
And I have a very fond memory of watching it with him and just laughing at the character of Laka.
sure.
And my dad loved Andy Kaufman. So from that, watching Taxi again now, and then going down like a very deep, deep, deep rabbit hole of Andy Kaufman, like becoming obsessed. Seth knows because I was talking to Seth about it. And anybody in my vicinity who would listen, I was telling friends of mine stories about Andy Kaufman. Yeah. And so I really was looking forward to watching this movie. And I saved it because, like I said, Seth was like, you can watch it on your own. I'm like, no, that's so silly. Or if I watch it on my own, then you're going to have to talk with me about it
Right.
on
Right.
on this podcast. Yeah.
So yeah, this whole month of doing Jim Carrey movies came about because basically you wanted to watch this movie.
Yeah.
And it's a testament to two things. One, how monumental watching a movie is for you.
Yeah.
Because if I was interested in somebody and there was a biopic of them, I would just watch it. And two, how much I just try to like make you happy.
Oh, well, that makes me feel bad because
No,
I don't want
why?
this. Well, because I don't want this to just be the Michelle show. But I do know you love this movie because after I
I
said like,
do.
have you watched it? And you were like, I've seen this like 11 times or something like
Oh
that.
yeah, I've seen this so many
And you
times.
were
Yeah.
like, it's great. And I was like, okay, cool. Then I think maybe this will happen on the show. I will save it for the podcast then if you
Yeah.
liked it.
I don't know what was originally slated for July because, like I said, now it's been like a few months. So we just kind of cleared whatever was supposed to be this month and then popped in Man on the Moon for the first one. And we tried to come up with different themes around it, and nothing really felt right. So we settled on just the rest of Jim Carrey's stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. And because we just were coming off of Docu June, we didn't want to go right into biopics because
Hmm.
we're like, let's
Right,
just
right, right.
spice it up with some Jim.
And this is actually a really good transition
Yeah.
because this has like a companion film, which is Jim and Andy: The Great Beyond, the documentary from Chris Smith, who directed American Movie, which we covered last month.
Hmm.
And sometimes, themes and connections will just emerge as we continue down this path. And this was a good one. It's a good one to start with. I want to talk about Jim and Andy, the doc, and I want to talk about Andy Kaufman and Taxi. And we are here to talk about Man on the Moon. So if you're listening and you're like, why aren't they talking about Man on the Moon yet? We are. It's just kind of maybe in a little roundabout way. And we're not going to spoil the doc or Taxi. We won't talk about.
Spoiled taxi.
Well, I don't know, the finale of Taxi. You never know.
It's funny.
But I'm just curious because I watched this close to when it came out.
Yeah.
I remember seeing previews for this, and the year before, Carrey did The Truman Show, which was a movie that I wouldn't have seen in theaters, but that was like a day one rental that we watched as a family and watched multiple times, and it was just like, oh my gosh, Jim Carrey, this is such a great performance, this is such a great movie. And I've been pretty vocal before about how I don't really like Jim Carrey's comedic stuff prior to
Yeah.
this. And
Yeah.
even as a kid, like when Truman Show came out, I was like, oh my God, yeah, like this is really great. And so Man on the Moon came out, and that was another one that I don't know that like necessarily we watched as a family, but I have older brothers. And so one of them may have rented it or just purchased it. And I watched this really close to when it came out. And it just completely blew my mind and readjusted how I like interacted with people socially.
Yeah, when you watched it when you were younger,
Hmm.
which watch did it take you to start researching Andy and being like, "Oh my gosh, Jim's portrayal it's uncanny."
Sure, sure. So this was like, this was 99. So the internet was still like
Yeah.
fledgling stuff. The only thing I knew of Andy Kaufman was from wrestling
Mhm.
and from the Mighty Mouse thing.
Mhm.
I don't know how I had seen the Mighty Mouse thing. Maybe it was on a VH1, top 20 live Saturday Night Live moments, or remember
Yeah.
VH1 and the
Yes, of
countdowns,
course.
and
Yes.
that was like cultural education there for
Yeah.
for children.
My favorite thing was pop-up video on VH1.
Pop up video. Don't you wish that we could do pop up video with the
Yes.
podcast?
I mean,
And just like
maybe
as we're
we
talking,
can.
little bubbles pull up that's like, Seth was involved in a car accident in da 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 da.
We could do that,
And
but
then
I'll
like,
just put false facts.
right, Michelle has gone on record to say that during this episode, blah 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 blah. Pop up video was great. If you don't know what that was, they would play a music video and then little bubbles would pop up and tell you stuff as you were
It's
watching it. It's great.
awesome.
It's
So
great.
good.
But anyway, so I only knew of Andy Kaufman through those two things. And being a kid, I didn't really fully comprehend the bad wrestler guy thing.
Mm.
Like we watched wrestling growing up, and so I knew that there were good guys and bad guys, but it just felt so like real and weird what he was doing.
Well, it was.
So yes, yes. But I guess I didn't really like perceive it as an act when I
Like
was a
a bit.
kid.
A
Yeah, I
bit.
was just like, oh, this guy's not good. He's not a good guy.
Yeah.
But watching the film, just all of the comments about like, I'm not a comedian and I don't care what the reaction is. I just want people to feel something, and all of the little antics. It probably wasn't great overall, but I was just like, oh, that's me. That's going to be like my life. And that's going to be how I interact with
Yeah.
people. And I'm just going to do things to get people weirded out. Like I'll eat a bug in front of people and I don't care if they think it's gross because I got a reaction from them
You were influenced.
completely. Like if I could pinpoint one film that changed my life as a preteen, it was this one.
Wow.
Yes. And I'm not,
Wow.
like I said, I'm not proud of it. I'm not like, you
Right,
know,
but to have that marker moment. And so,
yeah.
okay, on that though, like when did you start researching Andy Kaufman?
Later, like later when I got into stand up comedy,
Yeah.
like as a teenager and then older teen.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. But for
Yeah.
you, that's my story with it. But you were kind of coming to Andy Kaufman, as a mid 30-year-old woman,
Right.
and you're not just like, oh, okay, that's funny. You were
No.
you are in your Andy Kaufman era right now.
I am in my Andy Kaufman era. Yes. And again, as a kid, just drawn to Laka
Hmm.
and then to go on researching. And I was like, the way I feel about Bigfoot is the way I feel about Andy Kaufman. And if you're
Right.
new to this show or you're just tuning in, I love Bigfoot. I love
Yes.
Bigfoot, like this mythical creature. You don't know if they're real. You
Hmm.
love to hear stories about them. You can't get enough. You need to hear more. You don't really understand how they operate. It's like exactly how I feel about Andy Kaufman. Like I just need more and more and more. So I've been consuming a lot of Andy's stuff since I guess the beginning of April,
Hmm.
end of March.
Yeah.
Yeah. I want to just talk about Andy Kaufman all the time. And everybody who's close in my vicinity now is aware of that because that's all I talk about. That and cats. It's cats, Andy. Cats,
Right.
Andy. Yeah.
Andy Katzman.
Andy Katzman, right.
There's this weird thing with Kaufman that I'm not really surprised, to hear you bring up like the Bigfoot thing, where the idea of Andy Kaufman has grown past the life of Andy Kaufman,
Yeah.
we are not talking about the world's most successful comedian or the world's most popular performer, or the events in the film. They're all mixed up and mixed around.
Yeah.
When Andy died, he wasn't performing. Like, it wasn't like how it is in the film. But the idea of Kaufman and like what he did has so far surpassed anything that he did in his own life. And like, not knowing what's real and what's not real. I read a lot of Bob Zmuda and Lynn Margulies' book called Andy Kaufman, The Truth at Last, or something.
I was going to purchase that.
Yeah. And Zmuda just every paragraph he's pounding home like Andy Kaufman didn't die. He didn't die. He didn't die. It's kind of weird, but I mean, for Zmuda, it's like this is his kind of claim to fame, and so he wants to keep this thing going. Is kind of the impression that I took from it. There's a moment in Jim and Andy where Jim Carrey talks about how everyone in Andy's life wanted to be the most important person to Andy, right? And I think that like that's still a relevant thought about his legacy, where like everyone wants to define him, and if you don't understand him how they understand him, not even like as he actually was, you don't really know him.
Yeah.
There's a line in Man on the Moon where he's talking with Lynn and he says something like, that's not the real Andy Kaufman. And she says, there is no real Andy Kaufman. And he says, oh yeah, I forgot.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
her and Zmuda talk a lot about how everything was an act with him pretty much except for when he was at home. But
Yeah.
even when he was at home, he could like slip into
Yeah.
one of the characters. And I don't know if I'm saying what I want to say clearly, but it's like people still want to own him. It's just the interpretation of what he is and what his life work was. And to me, it's great because there isn't just one interpretation. There's a lot of different ones.
Well, right. That's like the perfect point, because I've noticed as I've gotten older, one of the first things I will do is I will look up someone's age
Mm-hmm.
and what they've done. Not to compare myself to it, but I'm just curious, right? So I look, when I was doing all my research, I'm like, oh my gosh, he passed away at 35. So
Wow.
instantly I'm like more into him because I'm 2 years older than Andy Kaufman.
Yeah.
And so that led me to listening. And I want to shout out, I listened to a great podcast. It was a docu-series called Knowing Andy Kaufman. I highly recommend it. And that's what I binged. And I'm going to listen to it again because I probably didn't absorb
Sure.
everything.
Sure.
But everything that I read, everybody has like you hear the same story or the same event just told a little bit differently. And that could be with anything in life, but
Absolutely.
you kind of gain a little bit more of Andy.
Yeah.
And that's fascinating to me. And on the humor front, watching his style of performance, not that I am someone who does things like you, Seth, but I actually can relate of like, oh, this is like something that I feel very in me before I even knew I had it in me. And then when
Mm.
I texted you today about the couch bit that we did at our live show, and you're like, we were channeling Kaufman
Yeah.
before, because I love that. Is this real? Is this not?
Yes.
Can I make you feel a little uncomfy?
Yeah. For those of you just joining us at our live show, we did a bit where in the middle of it, Michelle pretended like she needed to talk to me. And so we were like, hold on, everybody. Sorry, we have to pause the show for a second. And we like crawled on our hands and knees behind the couch that we were sitting on, still with our microphones so that people could hear us. And we did a bit where we were like, oh, how do you think the show is going? And we were like talking about people as if they couldn't hear us.
And we're
And then we just
whispering.
resumed the show. And 2 people after the show said that they thought that was real. And that was, to me, so everything that I wanted
Same.
from that entire event.
Same.
Was just like, I want people to walk away from this being like, why, what, how, not to mess with people, because you want to
Right.
entertain people, right?
Yes.
But you want someone to maybe think you're a little crazy.
Exactly. And there's
Yeah.
just like this little bit of truth. And not that I
Mm-hmm.
want to trick you or be mean, but like when we found that out, I'm not gonna lie, I felt super proud. I was like, "Wow, we did this."
Hmm.
And the other thing is like, well, I don't wanna speak for Seth, but, like, I'm not an actor, I'm not a I've never done
Yeah.
stand-up or comedian. I took improv classes, but, like, that's it.
Yeah.
And so to make it sound believable was pretty cool.
Yes. And like, you know, I think that there are figures in American entertainment that we invoke their name to describe something that perhaps they never would have done or thought. For films, we always say things are Lynchian, right? Oh, that's very Lynchian. It's David Lynch. Why? Well, because it's weird. Okay. Or Kaufman-esque is one
Mhm.
that we say. And like,
Mhm.
I think that Kaufman is great because you don't have to fully get him to have his work go inside of you and then you want to do something similar. Not to
Yeah.
rip him off or to be like, Andy Kaufman would love this, but
Right.
just that idea of like, oh my God, wait, I don't have to stand up and tell jokes.
Yeah.
Like, I can do something weird and off putting or strange. It can still be funny, or maybe it won't be funny, but people will always remember it.
Yeah, there's 2 things. There was a one scene in the movie. I know we're jumping around and we should probably start from the beginning, but I'll say this. Where after the Tony Clifton and Andy appearance, and George goes in and he's like, "What are you guys doing? You guys are doing this because you 2 think this is
Yes.
funny.
Yes.
Are you doing this for the people or are you doing it for each other?" And I thought of us, Seth, because I'm like, how
Yes.
many times you're like, "This is funny to us, but that's all that
There's,
matters."
yeah,
Right, and then I was reading
so
an
much
in
stuff that we do where
that's just for us.
it's like, yeah, that didn't really like get as many downloads or as many likes but at a certain point when you're doing this like week in and week out, you have to do things for you. Like
Right.
it has to, if you don't find what you're doing funny or interesting, then it's just a job and who cares?
Exactly. And then I was reading an interview with Lynn, and the person interviewing her was like, "Do you have any words or last remarks you want to say about Andy?" And this was like after he passed. And she said along the lines of like, Andy was always having fun
Yeah,
and he always wanted to find fun in everything. And I think that is something to aspire to do in the stuff you do. Like, just have
absolutely.
fun and make it for yourself sometimes. That's
Absolutely.
okay.
I think there's something to be said for being able to go outside of the norms and give people something that they'll never forget.
Yeah.
Because how many movies do you watch? How many TV shows? How many songs? How many stand up comedians? And like, what really stands out to you? As I was watching just tons of everything Andy Kaufman that I could find, right?
Mhm.
Some of stuff I've seen before because I really appreciate his stuff. Some stuff that I'd never seen, including when he interviewed his ex girlfriend, which you had sent to me and Krista. If you're listening to this and you watched Man on the Moon and you're like, oh, I'm interested in Andy Kaufman, find the video where he interviews his ex girlfriend. It is genius. He is sitting at a desk that's like 12 feet high,
Yes.
and she's sitting in a little chair. They never mention it. They go into the details of why they broke up. It's really awkward and unfunny. Then they pretend that they cut to commercial, but the interview continues and they're talking about the interview. And I was just like, this is so much everything that I love about performance. And I want to be really careful. Like, Andy was very adamant that he was not a comedian. Zamuda said that he was a behavioral scientist.
Ooh.
Sometimes I've heard, he's a performance artist, whatever. Andy was really into transcendental meditation. He's a vegetarian. He's a peaceful guy. Tony Danza was so annoyed with Andy Kaufman that he unloaded a water-filled fire extinguisher on him, the entire thing. And he said Andy Kaufman just stood there and didn't do anything. He didn't have any reaction. And Tony Danza was like, after that, I started to appreciate him and like look at him totally different. Another person said that one of the actors on set beat up Andy Kaufman And he didn't retaliate. He didn't do anything. He just like took it and it was over, So he's a very peaceful and like peace-seeking person who also was very into like rabble rousing and getting reactions from people, and it wasn't always, funny.
Yeah. Yeah. The riling up.
There's so much stuff about Andy Kaufman. Maybe we'll have to revisit Andy sometime soon. There's a new doc coming out called Thank You Very Much that we're very much looking forward to.
Yes. I've said to Seth, is there room in the movie Friends budget to fly me to Santa Barbara Film Festival so I can go view it for us? Because it aired, it played, it premiered in New York in April. And I missed it.
Andy, yeah, he wasn't on your radar yet.
Well, he was. I don't know. The doc, I guess I wasn't searching for the doc, but
yeah. So anyway,
we will see that.
We
will
need to
cover it.
revisit Kaufman at some
Yeah.
point in the future.
Yeah.
But for now, we're going to switch gears and talk about Man on the Moon. So you, Michelle, going into this, rewatching Taxi and thinking about Kaufman and all of this different stuff, now you go into the movie. How do you feel about the movie?
Well, I was so excited to watch it.
Yeah.
I mean, we made it a night. Aunt and I got pizza. I was like, you have to watch this with me. And let me tell you, I was so annoying to watch with because every scene that came, I was like, oh, Aunt, this is good. This is when blah, 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 because I already knew what was coming.
Oh, that's
I
awesome.
was just so, so excited. I was like, oh my God, Aunt, this is the Tony Clifton scene of when he like comes to set. And Aunt, because I've told Aunt everything now.
Mm-hmm.
I was so excited from the beginning, and the opening I think is perfect.
Yes, great.
The opening is like it is probably, if not my favorite part of the movie.
Yes, and you're referring to the Jim Carrey opening.
The credits.
Yeah.
This is the end of the movie. Here are the credits, and then the credits stop when the music stops, so he has to restart, and then we get the record scratch. Like this was my favorite, and we get this like tiny start of where we think this is going to be our narrator. Oh, it all starts and
right,
that goes
right.
away. This was great. Oh, also when the screen goes to black.
So the screen goes black for too long. And I don't want to say too long like I didn't like it, but like you start to be like, oh wow, they're really doing this. Like it's really staying black for longer than the viewer feels comfortable. And this is someone who's seen the movie countless times. And I've still felt like that rewatching it. I was like, oh my God.
I felt like that beginning with the black screen, with Andy being like, okay, some things are a little altered, blah, 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 but let's take a look. It all starts in Great Neck, New York. That felt like a film. And there's one scene where we get to jump ahead above of Andy in bed and his covers match his sheets.
Yes.
And I was like, oh, that's a film shot. But besides that, I was like, this feels very much like a movie and I'm into it. Yeah.
Great opening. Very fun. Very funny. And then we go to the Kaufman household and Andy as a kid. And this part, I don't want to say it makes me cry every time, but it almost makes me cry every time. And just the idea of like a kid who would rather be in his room pretending that there's a TV in his wall than play outside is like so relatable to me. I don't know about to you, but it's like,
for sure.
I have friends. I have an audience. Like, what do you like looking at a grown man being like, what are you talking about? Like I don't want to go outside. I everything that I have is right here. Right. Like making your own fun. And just like how that little kid plays it is so great. Like it's very sweet. He's not throwing a temper tantrum, but then you can also see like how heartbroken he is when his dad is like, no more playing by yourself.
Yeah, but then the light bulb goes off. He's like, I'll grab Carol. She's my built-in audience.
Right.
And she's so cute.
Yes.
So cute.
Yes. And like the idea as a kid of like your parents, I've been a child an odd child, and I've been a parent to odd children. And like that line of like not knowing where you're like cutting off their soul or doing what's best for them is like so heartbreaking. And it's such a fine line, you know, because with kids are like plants. If you
Yeah.
overwater it, you kill them. Or if you pluck too much, you know, you prune too much, you kill it. And it is very hard to revive a dream, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love the Mountain Goats. John Darnielle has a song, the best ever death metal band out of Texas. And it's about two kids who are starting a death metal band, and it doesn't go as planned, and the adults in their lives kind of like intervene. And there's a line: when you punish a person for dreaming their dream, don't expect them to thank or forgive you.
Mm.
And then it says, "Hail Satan." But like that line is like tattooed on my heart when it comes to children.
Yeah.
And so yes, I feel so much in this tiny little opening scene. It's amazing. It's amazing. That might be like my favorite part of this whole movie, and it's before anything even happens. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. This film came to be because Danny DeVito had worked with Milos Forman on One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Great movie. Great movie. Great performance by everyone involved. And they were at like a birthday party or something. And they were just talking, and Milos was asking him stories about working on Taxi. And he's telling him stories about Taxi, and then he's telling him stories about Andy Kaufman. I watched an interview with Danny DeVito on Charlie Rose where he's telling the whole story. And he was like, the more I told him about Andy, he just wanted to hear more and more and more. And, you know, he's like laughing and like he can't believe all these crazy things. And he's like, so basically, like that day, they were like, let's make this movie. Like, let's do it. And Milos is like, yeah, like if you can put it together, because Danny DeVito has his production company, and he's like, if you can put it together, absolutely, let's do it. And it became like a buzzy thing. A lot of people wanted to do this. Edward Norton really wanted to do this, which I cannot imagine for the life of
Wow.
me. Bob Zmuda was gunning hard for Nick Cage to be Andy Kaufman, which as a Nick Cage lover, I am like, I need to see the Nick Cage Andy Kaufman movie.
Can we see that audition tape?
So apparently Nick Cage was tricked by Jim Carrey. Now, this is all according to Bob Zmuda's book. Jim Carrey wanted the movie so much, and he knew that Nick Cage was like a favorite amongst the people who were making it. He apparently had a talk with Nick Cage, and he said, you know, guys like us, we really shouldn't be doing audition tapes. It's not right for them to make us do that. And Nick Cage was like, yeah, you're right. And so because so many people wanted it, Milos was like, I'm going to make them do an audition tape.
Yeah.
Yeah, like that. Stars do not do that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so Jim kind of like tricked Nick Cage into not pursuing the role, but just being like, hey, none of us should do an audition tape.
Wow.
Meanwhile, he did one and
Dirty.
And showed it to Bob Zmuda, who claims that he did not know it wasn't Andy. Like he thought that Jim Carrey was just playing him old clips of Andy Kaufman and did not realize that it was Jim Carrey on the screen.
Wow.
I don't know that I believe that.
Yeah,
but
I don't
that's
know if
his
I
claim.
believe. Yeah, sure. Bob Zmuda, what an interesting dude you are.
Yes.
I'm pretty sure like that would be like, Seth, if someone were to play you or someone were to play me.
Yeah.
And brings me a tape, I would hope you'd be like, that's not Michelle, but that's a good impression.
Right.
You know?
Right.
She sounds
yes.
just like her and vice
I
versa.
had no idea. Yeah, he said it's
No
like a
idea.
10-minute video that he watches, and he had no idea that it wasn't Andy.
I mean, like, Jim does an amazing job. Spoiler alert. Watch the Jim and Andy doc because whoa, mind will be
Yes.
blown. But he sounds just like him. But yes, he looks like him too. But you take one look, you're like, oh, there's no blue eyes.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
I mean, you know, there's a.
Yeah. One thing that kept bothering me throughout the movie was like Jim's hair is too long
I know.
throughout the majority of it.
I
And
know.
it's like, no, like some things were off. I guess my big idea of this movie is that it's not a one for one Andy Kaufman movie. This is a Hollywood movie version of the Andy Kaufman story. It's a
Yes.
piece of the story,
Yes.
just like the book and the docs and the podcast and the clips and the this and the lore. It's all a piece of it. But
Well
I do
said.
not believe that Man on the Moon is like the definitive version.
Yeah.
And Jim Carrey, here's what I'll say is like Jim Carrey gives an incredible performance. I don't know that Jim Carrey gives an incredible Andy Kaufman. And I don't mean that in a bad way. And I'm curious to see if there are like a lot of deleted scenes because rewatching it this time, I was struck by like how much Tony Clifton stuff there is and how much Jim as Andy is doing like loud stuff where we didn't get a lot of the Uncle Andy's Playhouse TV special, which is fascinating.
The only thing we get of that is when Andy and Lynn go to the movies to get popcorn. Andy is wearing an Uncle Andy's Funhouse
yeah.
t-shirt. That's the only reference. And I have it in my notes because I'm like, why can't we have that?
There's just some quieter aspects to
I
Andy
know.
that I feel like aren't in Man on the Moon. And so Man on the Moon, like you said, it feels like a movie. This feels like a popcorn movie. This feels like, let's take this big Hollywood star who's got all this charisma. We'll make the film in an entertaining, easy to understand way that goes from point A to point B. It's like the rise and then death of Andy Kaufman, not necessarily showing the times of squalor and not working. And so, and then like obviously a lot of the wrestling stuff. So it seems like they picked the bigger stuff
Like
to
the highlight
do.
reel.
Yeah, but not even like because to me, I think to you, if we were doing a highlight reel, it would have the big desk.
Absolutely. And I looked up like the deleted scenes to see if any of that was in there, and it really wasn't.
Yeah.
There wasn't anything big, but I agree with you on that. I mean, it's hard to sum up someone's life in under 2 hours.
Yeah. But like there's so much Carson stuff that
Yep.
wasn't I don't think he goes on Carson at all in the
No, we don't
movie.
see that.
We just get the David Letterman stuff, which is great, but
And it goes with the wrestling.
yeah, but like it's also like the slap from David Letterman, where Andy Kaufman did this repeating thing where he would go on David Letterman and talk about the 3 children that he had adopted, and then it turns out to be like 3 grown black men, and they would come out and talk, and it was a whole
Yep.
bit, but it wasn't loud and flashy and like big, and that's what I mean. Like the movie seems to stick to those things, you know.
Yeah. I felt like, because I watched this movie twice
Mhm.
and I watched the Jim and Andy doc twice.
That's unreal.
Can you believe that? In
Li-
less than a week, Michelle watched the same 2 movies, like 4 movies essentially.
That is unheard of.
That
It's
is how you
unheard of.
know I am obsessed now and I
Yes.
love something.
Yes.
And now I'm studying it. So I'm like
Yes.
in the school of Andy, right?
Yeah.
And performance. But I felt like every actor probably brings a little bit of themselves to the role,
Hmm.
of course.
Yeah.
And I felt like I could see Jim a couple of times. Like
Definitely.
he would do these mannerisms. Like, I don't know Andy, but it's too much of Andy or how Andy
Hmm.
wouldn't do that. And then like Jim being method is interesting, of him just feeling like he encapsulated Andy Kaufman and Tony Clifton, and that Jim Carrey wasn't actually in this movie.
Yeah. So that's a big thing that the documentary covers. You know, Danny DeVito in that Charlie Rose interview, he mentions it briefly and he mentions it in like a totally positive way. He says, Jim gave us Andy back for 4 months. If you watch the documentary, it is a very different opinion and
Yeah.
experience from
Yeah.
everyone involved, especially Milos Forman, who appears to just being tormented by Jim Carrey. It's a big subject. It's a big subject to talk about and to cover that a lot of people have a lot of feelings on. And I think you should always be nice first,
Yes.
and you should be funny second.
Yes.
And I think that if you need certain things in order to do your job, that's okay.
Yes.
Everyone has quirks and
Yeah.
oddities about them, and sometimes you can cater to that, and sometimes you can't.
Yeah.
Watch the doc for sure.
Well, also watch the doc, not just for Andy Kaufman, but because we are in Jim Carrey month.
Yeah.
It is you truly get a sense of Jim Carrey, where he is
Definitely.
now, how he got going. You go inside of his mind, and I never really did any research on Jim Carrey except that he was Canadian.
Mm-hmm.
So this doc really opens you up, and you're, like I said, I was enthralled. I watched this the first time by myself, and I was just like, my mind was blown.
Yeah, it's good. It's a
It's
very
really
well
good.
made. Like we said, Chris Smith.
Yeah.
He's a great storyteller,
Yeah.
and Bob Zamuda and Lynn Margulies filmed
Yeah.
tons and tons and tons of hours of interviews and behind the scenes stuff from Man on the Moon. So if you like the movie, it's more than worth it to check it out just to see all of that
Yeah.
stuff. But
Yeah.
yeah, they dive deep into this idea of letting Andy Kaufman perform through Jim Carrey. Yeah, it's interesting.
It is.
So yeah, like I said, there are some parts where he's doing the voice. He's doing the quiet
Yeah.
Andy Kaufman stuff. He's doing that really, really well. There's some times where he's doing the louder stuff and it feels more like Jim Carrey. But I think it's still a good performance.
Absolutely. I think he
Yes.
really did a good job, and I can't really imagine anyone else playing him. Not that I've seen audition tapes, but
Sure.
from what I've seen, this is pretty good.
Did you cry?
I did not cry.
Okay.
No. Yeah, twice through, did not cry.
Wow. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So Kaufman got very sick. He had a rare form of lung cancer. And in the movie, he travels to the Philippines for this thing called psychic surgery, which was totally real. That happened. He did do that. I remember seeing news stories about psychic surgery as a kid. I don't know. Have you ever heard of this before
I
this
have
movie?
not. Nope.
Yes. So it's all just sleight of hand.
This is
And
pretty gross in the movie.
yeah, oh, it's disgusting.
This is so graphic.
Yeah. They're pulling out like chicken meat and livers and organs
Yeah,
and stuff. And
it's pretty gross.
yeah. But, you have people who are desperate to live and they have money.
Sure, of
And
course.
so you're going to try anything and everything. I can't speak for real life, but in the film, this is probably my second favorite moment when Andy sees that it's a trick and he sees that it's sleight of hand. And then he just laughs. And he literally, like, the way that the two shots are dissolved into each other, he laughs into death.
Into death. Yeah.
Obviously, psychic surgery is nonsense, but just the idea of like, oh, I know what this is, and not like, oh, this is okay. Like, I don't think the film is saying like Andy Kaufman was okay with ripping people off and giving people false hope. But like, for me, it's just like a great reminder that everything is a bit of a joke. And
Yeah.
even in hospitals and medical treatments, we're doing our best. Everyone's doing their best. And the best that you can do sometimes is try. It's an unknown, and so coming down to just this hut and it's sleight of hand and he laughs, I was like, I relate very much to this idea.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I want to be super, super clear. I'm not like an anti-doctor hospital medical person at all. Like, I don't think that those things are a sham. I just think in life, there's so much that we can't control, right?
Yeah. And you're talking about this particular scene in
Yeah,
in a movie. Yeah.
But it's like, the systems that we've put in place are all to tell us that you'll live forever. If you just do X, Y, and Z, if you eat right, and throughout the film, everyone keeps saying like, you don't smoke, you eat super healthy. Like, how could you get sick? And that's the dark humor of life.
You know what? Okay. So I've been thinking about this.
Yeah.
And yes, Andy had he had cancer, this
Hmm.
rare lung cancer. He didn't smoke. I was like, but Tony Clifton smoked.
Yes. So apparently in real life, he would not inhale when he smoked.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes. And we've
Yeah.
talked about this before, how like I don't really know what that means. Like I don't
Well, you
really
just
know.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
Danny DeVito as George Shapiro.
Yeah, I thought this was interesting. I thought he did a great job as playing George Shapiro, his agent, because we have pretty much the entire cast of
Mm-hmm.
Taxi
Mm-hmm.
in this movie, minus Tony Danza, who had a prior engagement apparently. But Tony Danza, I mean, Danny DeVito played Louis De Palma on Taxi.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
And so it's like, and I was like, oh, how are we going to do this? We're just not going to acknowledge Louis.
And this is where we start to get into the I'm okay with this being a piece of the truth, because when we do David Letterman, they don't make him look like young David
No,
Letterman. When we
nobody's made
do
to look young.
Lorne Michaels,
Who looks
it's
younger, right? Though of what we know now,
well, right, but
because
like
it's
it's not
99.
the first day of Saturday Night Live. Lorne Michaels was like a child, you know
Right.
what I'm saying? And so
Yes.
Man on the Moon is like, and I think that's why the opening that you were talking about is so genius, is because it's like, welcome to my movie. My name is Andy Kaufman. Well, no, it's not. And no, this isn't the end of the
Right.
movie. Everything is off. Everything is like
Right.
off kilter. And by not being so strict to reality, even the reality of the movie, we can allow for things that are less than perfect in the depiction, including Danny DeVito.
Right. Playing George Shapiro.
Yes.
Yeah. But
Yes.
what I loved is we still had George Shapiro make an appearance, and we had
Yep.
Lynn Margulies make an appearance, and Bob Zamuda
Yep.
make an appearance. So
Yep.
a lot of people in Andy's life were in this movie playing other roles.
Yeah.
And then, like, to have the cast of Taxi, like I said, most of them in there, which Christopher Lloyd looks the same.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Um, he took the DeLorean and he just time
Yes.
travels, I'm convinced. But they have like no lines.
Mm-hmm.
They're just reacting to Andy, and I loved watching the montage of them recreating scenes with Jim as Andy, because I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, I remember that episode.
Right. It's great. Yeah, it's great.
It's
And
great.
it's
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 great.
it's just such an odd play world that the
Yes.
movie
Yeah.
creates,
Yeah. But it works if you're a fan, because I appreciated it.
Yeah, yeah. I like how DeVito plays George Shapiro. Like, he's slightly exasperated, but
Yeah.
he's still appreciative of Andy, looking out for Andy, and like fatherly towards Andy.
And very much loves him.
Yeah,
It's so clear that comes through.
yeah, yeah.
I mean, the all him saying, I don't want to do I don't want to do Taxi. I don't want to do a sitcom. Him having to play into the Tony Clifton of it all and pitch to the network and explain how he needs
Hmm.
2 contracts. And it's,
Yes,
yeah, he's a
Danny
good agent.
DeVito.
He's a good agent.
Danny DeVito said that Tony, this is real life. Tony had his own manager that you
Yep.
had to speak to. He had his own agent. He had a completely different answering service. So he was set up completely as if he
Mm-hmm.
was his own person.
Mm-hmm.
And in the book, Zamuda says that when Andy would do Tony Clifton, that he would actually do him for like 3 to 4 days at a time. He wouldn't just like put it on and then go do the thing. That he would like slowly morph into Tony Clifton and then stay in Tony Clifton for a little bit afterwards.
Tony Clifton, how I discovered Tony Clifton.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I was watching Taxi, and the episode happens where Louis De Palma's brother makes an appearance. And so I was
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, I wonder who this guy is. And I'm looking up, and that's how I got into the Tony Clifton. And I was like, and this was before I was researching Andy so hard. I was like, wait a minute. Wait a minute. What? So I
Yes.
obviously I didn't see Tony, because Tony never makes it on the show.
Yeah.
But I was so captivated by this story. I I it's like my mind is blown. I love Tony Clifton. Truly, I think it's one of like one of my favorite characters.
I do not like Tony Clifton. I like the
Oh,
idea
I think
of
it's so
it.
funny. So
Uh,
funny.
I'm not big into like mean humor, and so
No, me
I
neither.
think that's
That's
kind of
why.
why, you know.
Totally. But the
Yeah.
idea that to create, like, you're acting as this person, but this person is a totally different person,
Hmm.
and everyone has to acknowledge that is really funny to me.
Well, it's like another way for Andy Kaufman to bomb because
Well,
he has all these different characters who are purposefully meant to not do well on stage, which is the opposite. No one goes on stage wanting to bomb. So Andy comes up with these different versions
yeah.
of different characters. Foreign man, of course, and then guy who doesn't really know what he's doing. Zamuda called it like the innocent Andy, and then like Tony Clifton, where you now people might feel bad for the foreign man character or the innocent guy, but they hate Tony Clifton. They're angry, and so now it's like you're bombing with anger. You're getting a different emotion from it. So
But, like,
like,
my favorite thing about Tony Clifton is when Tony Clifton goes on stage and then Andy Kaufman walks out,
yes,
and
yes,
then the crowd mind is blown, and
yes,
you're like, "Wait, I thought that was what is happening?" I
yes,
love it. I love it
yes.
so much.
And it's a good trick that the movie plays too,
Yes, it does.
because Paul Giamatti as Bob Zamuda had to play both parts. He had to do Tony Clifton too. I am curious if they ADR'd
I
in
know, I was
Jim
wondering
Carrey's.
that.
I was
Mhm.
watching those lips, man, so closely.
Yeah.
Paul Giamatti as Bob Zamuda. Love Giamatti so much. We've only talked about him in our other Jim Carrey episode on The Truman Show, which is so weird.
So weird.
And I looked it up. They haven't done another movie together, so we can never talk about Paul Giamatti again, unfortunately. He got the role, but the role originally was going to go to, do you know who it was?
No.
Milos Forman saw on Saturday Night Live an episode that was hosted by Garth Brooks. He calls up Bob Zamuda and Danny DeVito, and he's like, Garth Brooks is going to play Bob Zamuda in the movie.
No!
Garth Brooks canceled a sold out show to fly to meet Milos Forman for dinner and came in like in a get up and did Tony Clifton full on. And he was like, I want this. I want to do it. I can play both parts. He agreed to playing both parts. Yes. Apparently, it didn't happen because whoever represented him was like, no, we don't want you to do this.
Wow.
This is also, we cannot, here at Movie Friends, we cannot confirm. We can only report what other people say. According to Bob Zamuda, Garth Brooks was so into this idea of playing dual roles that when he didn't get it, he created his Chris Gaines persona, his alter ego. I don't know if you remember that.
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
Yes.
with like the black hair and the little goatee. And he put out an album because he was so into this like whole Andy Kaufman double persona thing. And so it's quite possible that Milos Forman watching Garth Brooks on Saturday Night Live led to Chris Gaines.
Wow. Wow.
Isn't that wild?
That is wild.
And as much as Giamatti rules in this,
He's really
because
good.
he's also very good at playing like the character who's getting the water poured on him and
Mhm.
slightly sleazy and, but then also being able to turn it on sympathetic when he finds out that Andy has cancer. And he's
Yeah.
great. Giamatti rules in everything, but I want to see. So I need to see the Nick Cage and Garth Brooks
We need to see it. Yes.
Man on the Moon.
Wow.
Courtney Love apparently was always Milos's pick for Lynn Margulies. He had worked with her in The People versus Larry
Wow.
Flint, and
Yeah.
he was like, yes, she can do this.
She was great.
She was great. She wasn't in it as much as I remembered her being in it.
Yeah, I
I
would
was
have
kind of
given her
surprised.
more. I would have liked to have seen, well, if we did things differently. She directed The Breakfast with Blassie,
Mhm.
and that's how it was like Andy was a part of that film, that it was her brother's film, I believe, that she was directing, and that's how they really met. So I would
Yeah,
have
she
liked
was
to have
in
seen,
it. She was in that one. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
but I would have, or she was editing it rather, in it and editing it, but I would have liked to have seen that as how they met, but I guess we'll just tie in the wrestling and have her a
Yeah.
part of it.
Like
And,
they say at the beginning, everything is out of order and things are
right,
moved around and all different. But
right.
yeah, I mean, show us that thing with
Yeah,
Andy.
right.
To not to defend Andy's parents and family, because there's all kinds of stories about all of
Oh,
that. But
yeah.
like one of the Letterman segments that he did was he brought his parents on
I
because
know.
he was like, "Oh yeah, I took this course to learn how to tell people that I love them,
Yep.
and so I want to bring my parents out to tell them that I love them." And he does it, and it's like not funny. It's like very sweet. It's awkward. It's weird, and like that's the stuff. Like the wrestling, yes, the rest of the stuff is genius, and Tony Clifton is genius. But like to go on late night and bring out your real life parents and pretend to tell them that you love them for the first time is so unfunny, but so incredible. Like that's magic to me. You know what I mean?
Yes,
Like
I agree.
to me, that's like the crowning achievement of someone's life. And they just blow over all of that stuff.
They
It's
don't really
such a
include the
bummer.
family that much. The only time we really see them is like in the beginning, and then we have these inserts of his family watching him on television.
It's just like the disappointed people
Yeah,
throughout
and
the
like,
whole movie.
and what I've learned and read is like he also loved his grandmother. He was so close with his
Yes.
grandmother. We don't even have a grandmother in this film, and then it's like, well, how far do we go to casting all these people, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I know I would have liked to have seen that bit.
Yes. Yes.
A
Just
little
the
more
quieter
heart.
stuff.
Just a little more heart.
Little more heart, little more quiet. Because when Jim Carrey keeps saying, "I'm not a comedian," but the only stuff that we're seeing are the out and out comedic bits,
Yeah.
it's less easy to believe. But then when you watch the actual Kaufman stuff, you're like, oh, he's not really a comedian. Like this is really much more like performance art.
Yeah. Yeah.
Another thing about Lynn and Courtney Love, she's not introduced until an hour into a 2-hour film, which for a
Mhm.
biopic is really interesting.
I mean, is it?
I think so. I mean,
And
I haven't done the math, but like to introduce like the love character, the love story
well, because
halfway through your movie, it's pretty interesting.
yeah, well, I think because he had other girlfriends or just other women he was kind of involved with and his relationship with women in general.
Yeah.
And then Lynn just was the one she was the one who was with him when he passed.
Right.
So I guess we're like, we'll just use her.
Right.
Yeah, but again, the storytelling of how events happened are kind of out of place.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Yeah. You know what was jarring to see?
What?
So Brian Peck was the announcer. He had like a very short line. He was the announcer on the Fridays
Oh, the
bit.
Friday segment. Yeah.
And, Brian Peck is the one who was arrested for assaulting Drake Bell.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Oh,
And
that's who that is.
watching that doc, yeah, quite on the set when that all came out. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's Brian Peck.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, I did not realize that. I didn't have that.
Jarring.
I didn't
Yeah.
have that jarring experience. Holy moly.
Yeah.
The funeral scene is great. We get Andy singing the song Friendly World from the end of his special. And again, as a kid, so Man on the Moon, Talking Heads Stop Making Sense. Those were my two ideas of like, this is how you do a performance. His Carnegie Hall thing, where it's like, and now here's Santa Claus, and now here's this, and we're going to go for milk and cookies. And then, your funeral is like making people sing along with you as you're dead. I was like, oh my God, this is what like
Yeah.
performance is like. And then,
Yeah.
yeah, like you throw in Stop Making Sense with like David Byrne and the idea of like the band coming out one at a time and the show gets bigger. Like, how do you make something get bigger and bigger. But I love the funeral scene. It's a tearjerker for sure.
Yeah.
Carol Kane was the only cast member from Taxi to go to Andy's
I
funeral.
know, and she poked him to see
And
if he
she
was
poked
really
him.
dead.
Yep. Zamuda also
Yeah.
claims that Andy's friend, who was a doctor, kept shaking the body in the casket. And he said that it did not act the way that a body does when it's in a casket. I aspire to this level of like confusing people. And like, seriously, like,
Yeah.
you know, everyone wants people to come to their funeral and say what a good person they were. I would love for people to come to my funeral and legitimately be like, I don't know if this is true or not. And also like mess with them one last time.
Yeah. Well, if you want, I could start that rumor.
Just do like one last bit. Just
One
something.
last bit.
I told Jean-Marie years back, I said, I don't want to have an open casket funeral because I would like to be cremated. But at my funeral, could you get a casket and put like a fake body in it, but it's like a middle-aged woman with like bright red hair, and just don't say anything to anyone. So like stand, you know, have everybody, the family greets people as they walk in, and then everyone's all like, oh my God, Seth. And then they go up to the casket and it's just not me. And it's someone like who's very much not me.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be awesome?
That'd be so funny. I mean,
and like, and then wait and see if people say anything.
right. Like, how long does it take for someone to say something?
And so if people, because people are like, I don't want to go up to Jean-Marie. Oh my God. And then they go up to her and she's just like, yeah, he wanted to be cremated. That's not him.
No, or I would just say, oh, yeah, that's Ruth. And that, yeah.
It's great. So
It's great.
I would like, I just, that's what I would like.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It's good.
So after the funeral, we go back to the club and Tony Clifton is there playing I Will Survive, which is so morbid, but so funny.
Yep.
And so, okay, you know, you think it's Bob Zamuda continuing the act on stage. And then the camera goes through the crowd and Bob Zamuda is standing at the back. And then we end on the shot of Andy in neon, you know, amongst all the other comics.
Mm-hmm.
And again, it's just kind of a funny little trick, even of the movie makers, to where you think that that might be Paul Giamatti, but now you don't know if it's Paul Giamatti or Jim Carrey performing as Tony Clifton. Is it a third person? And obviously there's camera cuts and things, so it's not like a magic trick, but it's just a fun little way of like continuing this idea.
Yeah. Yeah. I liked it.
Yeah, it's good. It's good. Last thing that I'll say about Tony Clifton, when Tony Danza was talking about why he had problems with Andy, Andy did not come to the normal rehearsals. He would come to the run through, but they had to hire a separate actor to like do the Latka stuff on tap, which is just insane. Like that's
I know.
insane.
Imagine being hired to just do rehearsals. I would love to do that. I could do that.
It's
I could
crazy.
be a stand-in. Light me. Who?
Well, I mean, right, stand-ins, that's totally normal.
Sure,
You know,
but
you get someone to
rehearsals.
stand there for hours while they're fixing lights, and you know,
Yep.
you don't want the major star to have to be there and do that. And he said when it was time for Tony Clifton came to all the rehearsals. So like Andy kept up this totally separate person down to like completely different behaviors for rehearsals and being on the show. It's unbelievable. Like the dedication to messing with people.
I love it. I love it so much. I really think, I know you were like, I said this to Seth. I was like, I want to be Tony Clifton for Halloween and you could be Andy Kaufman. I can't be Andy Kaufman. You at least can play with your facial hair. I could wear prosthetics and I could be like, yeah, like
Right.
I could do a better Tony Clifton. And then Seth was like, yeah. And then halfway through the night, we'll switch.
Yes. Halfway through the night, we both disappear and then come back. And now I'm Tony Clifton. And just pretend like nothing happened. Like, don't say anything to anybody.
Yeah, it's great.
It'd be great if we could do it like mid-conversation. Like I'm conversing with one person, you're conversing with another. And then while we're changing, we'll be like, okay, this is what we're talking about. And so you come back to the person I was talking to and just continue. Like, yeah, so what were you saying about?
Right. And then I would just like slap, if I was in, I would just slap the drink out of the hand or,
Yeah.
yeah. It's great. Oh, man. I would love to do that.
So this movie was made for $52 million.
Wow.
At this point, Jim Carrey was getting ungodly amounts of money for all of his roles. And so I have to imagine, I mean, looking at this movie, I would think this movie cost $30 million, especially back in, 1999. Can you imagine, by the way, being Jim Carrey? We talk about Jim Carrey's early 90s run, and we will for sure over the course of this month. But like the Truman Show and then Man on the Moon back to back years.
Well, how about the 3 that came out in 94? Dumb and Dumber,
No,
Ace
that's what I'm
Ventura, and The
saying.
Mask. Right. And then, it's, to be Jim Carrey.
It's nuts.
It's crazy.
So this only made 47 at the box office. So it did lose money. Unfortunately, if, maybe if they didn't pay people as much, they would have made a profit. But this has 64 on Rotten Tomatoes, which is very close to being a rotten score. That kind of surprised me, honestly. 3.8 on Letterboxd, which feels closer to what I would think. And then 58 on Metacritic.
Wow.
Yes. Ebert gave this a 3.5 out of 4.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Yep. And they shot from late July to late November. Pretty close to four months straight.
Mm.
So we asked some friends on Twitter what they thought. QAR, hashtag look for the helpers, at Q_Romy says, this was the only film I could watch with him being Jim Carrey, in it. I love Andy Kaufman, and Jim played him brilliantly.
Wow.
And I agree. There were only a few Jim Carrey movies that I would watch until very recently in my life. Paul Muad'Dib at Trigraptor.
Hey, we know that guy.
We know that guy. Says, blurring the line between June's and July's themes, I've seen the Netflix documentary Jim and Andy, which casts Carrey in a pretty negative light, but I've never seen this movie with the bespoke performance. As always, Movie Friends has me filling some of my cinematic blind spots.
Nice.
So I'm very excited if people haven't seen this.
Yeah.
And they're watching along with us to see this for the first time. I'm very curious, Paul, if you listen to this, send us an email and let us know what it was like watching the doc first. I can't imagine doing that.
Yeah. Or if you knew anything about Andy Kaufman.
Yeah. Very curious about that.
Yeah.
A Matter of Life and Seth at Seth_Stoger.
Another Seth?
Yeah, another one.
Fellow Seth.
I have a lot of fellow Seths on Twitter, film guys.
Wow, you have Seth friends?
Yeah, my Sethies.
Your Sethies? You should have a podcast just of Seths, the round table of Seth.
I think I've told this story before, but I used to be in a Facebook group called Seths or the Seth Club. And it was just like 200 dudes named Seth, and we would all talk about what it's like to be a Seth. And it was so unreal how similar almost everyone was.
You know what? It honestly, like, I've only met a couple of Seths in my life, and their guys are all very similar.
Mm-hmm. There's just something about you get that name, and it's like
you're dubbed. This is your life.
Yeah. I mean, like a Seth is not a Chris. A Seth is not an Andy. It's like you're the Seth of the group.
That's right. It's not a Matt.
No. Anyway, Seth says Andy's life and Carrey's performance of it certainly ask us to examine the line between artifice and art. Performers like Bo Burnham have renewed that discussion. Is there a fundamental or quote unquote line in the sand position that we should take between the two? How far is too far?
Yeah, I was seeing a lot of people referring to Andy as alt comedy, you know that term?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I just, no. It doesn't apply.
I think places don't exist for certain people.
That's right.
And so Andy had an entry point, which was stand-up comedy, which you can do because no one pays you and there's open mics. And so that's where you go to perform in front of people. And he did a myriad of things, singing and dancing and puppets. And, the Tony Clifton puppet in his interview with his ex-girlfriend is just unbelievable. But
Yeah.
to answer Seth's question, how far is too far? What is the line in the sand? I think it's hard to define. I think it is kind of like a it when you see it kind of a thing. I think all stand-up comedians, especially now as stand-up is like being redefined in the age of like the self-revealing monologue stuff, like with Mike Birbiglia and
John
Hannah
Mulaney.
Gadsby and John Mulaney. I think we're in a period where comedy is finding like new grounds. Tim Heidecker's A Night with Tim Heidecker is probably my favorite stand-up of all time. And it's basically just like a stand-up about stand-up comedy. It's unbelievable how good it is. And he's doing a character the whole time. Highly recommend that one. And then How Far is Too Far? I don't think that exists. I think that an artist, if Andy Kaufman lied to his family about having cancer and he faked his own death and he shows up now as like a 95-year-old man, I would laugh.
I would laugh too.
I would say good job. Even what you did was messed up, but you know what? I love it.
Yeah, I mean, my mind would be blown with that one too.
Yeah. So, don't be violent to other people. I think that's a good line to draw.
And don't hurt, like physically.
Yeah.
Unless you're wrestling, I guess.
Yeah. Maybe don't like bring chickens on stage and kill them in front of people.
Don't kill animals.
No. But then, I mean, you get into like Gigi Allen, the famous, not famous punk singer who would like literally poop and pee on stage and throw it at the audience and rub it all over himself and make himself bleed. And he was actually quite violent. He assaulted people on stage. Yeah. And I think that there's a part of that goes into what are people there for and what are people not there for. Obviously, we don't condone assaulting people for the sake of art or performance. If someone wants to get on stage, I mean, Andrew WK did a version of that, when we were teenagers, where he would bash himself and make himself bleed, or he would shove his fingers up his nose repeatedly to make himself have these like massive nosebleeds. And it was part of his performance. And I think that that's fine. I think that as long as you're not like straight up killing yourself, that, if you can find it in yourself to do something that shocks people and makes people uncomfortable or makes people like come alive, and that's your goal, go for it.
I have a lot to say about that, but let's keep going.
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah.
So if I give myself a big nosebleed at our next live show, you're not going to be happy?
Oh no, you can do that. It's just that's totally fine.
Okay, this one is Panda Emoji, Hunty Whiz, Green Day 729 exclamation point.
It sounds like an AIM screen name. I love it.
At Hunty Whiz.
Okay.
So I'm assuming that Hunty Whiz is going to see Green Day on 729.
Woohoo!
Says, Andy was so ahead of his time. Jim did a great job. And I agree. And I pulled that one because Andy was so ahead of his time. If you watch the stuff that he was doing, everyone is doing Andy Kaufman stuff now.
Yep.
Everybody.
Yeah.
It's amazing. The influence, man, that this dude has. And then finally, the Dagzaba system at Melissa Dags, who, by the way, has been doing live Mad Men recaps.
I know. I've been seeing that. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah. And I've been watching.
Yeah?
Yeah. I like Mad Men.
Yeah, I love Mad Men.
Okay, so this one's long, so buckle in.
Buckle up, Buttercup.
I was obsessed with this film and with Andy Kaufman for a while. After watching the doc about the making of the film, I'm struck by Jim's assertion that his mistreatment of the cast and crew was channeling Andy, when I think it was an excuse to use quote-unquote method acting to wield power. From most accounts, Andy was quite gentle and always looking for a way to sow a kind of playful chaos. It didn't always work out that way, but there didn't seem to be too much edge, just mayhem. Jim Carrey brought an edge to that set that seems misplaced. That said, it's a remarkable performance, and Courtney Love is fantastic, as is the rest of the supporting cast. I love the moment when he realizes the treatment he's traveled to get in Manila is a sleight of hand. Masterful acting and filmmaking in that beat. Yeah, I agree.
Well said. Yeah, totally.
Maybe Jim should have focused more on the transcendental meditation part of Andy.
Well, that's what I really wanted him to talk about. Like, are you at home meditating? You were in these roles. Also, your mental health.
Yeah. What works for one person does not work for another.
Absolutely.
That's all I can say,
And it does sound like, I know this is the last thing I'll say. It does sound like he was like trying to be Andy. It came to him.
Yeah.
He kind of he was like sitting on the ocean and he just felt like the spirit of Andy enter him. And so, yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
So there's some people that we do know. Now we go to a segment of the show where we hear from people we don't know. It's called half star, 3-star, 5-star. All right. So these are reviews from letterboxd.com. We start with a half-star review, which is the lowest rating that you can give a film. And we go all the way to a 5-star review, which is the highest rating that you can give a film. Do you have a request for the half-star?
Yeah, Tony Clifton.
Ah.
That's easy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
shut up.
Okay.
Shut up. You. Shut up. See,
I should give you this review, and you can do it as Tony Clifton.
No, go ahead. Read it.
All right.
He's like a Muppet.
Yes, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Danny DeVito said he thought that Tony Clifton was like the opposite of Andy in every way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Half-star review read by Tony Clifton says, I couldn't decide if this was a good film with awful subject material or a bad film failing to do its subject justice. Either way, it just made me give up trying to work it out. Half-star.
That was good. I loved it.
So yeah, couldn't decide if this was a good film with awful subject material or a bad film failing to do its subject justice.
It's funny. That's a funny review, actually. And it sounds like something Tony Clifton would say. So that's pretty great.
3-star review says, a super engaging story about a guy I know surprisingly little about. Find myself deep diving on Google the second the credits rolled. Good. I've never been the biggest Jim Carrey fan, if I'm being honest. I think he's insanely talented. Just not necessarily my cup of tea, but he was good here. Now, Paul G. and Danny D., that's worth the price of admission.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Good review.
And the 5-star review is super short, but it's everything that I feel about this movie, and I think it's the perfect thing to walk away with. 5-star review says, Andy Kaufman might just be my hero, about to go down a rabbit hole.
Oh, well, yes.
Yes. So we have a segment of the show where we talk about what we would cut, what we would edit, and what we would keep. It's called What the Keck. And do you want to go first? You want me to go?
You can go first.
All right. So I actually wrote mine out this time, so it'd be super easy to remember. Yeah. For cutting, I would probably, and this might seem really weird, but I would probably cut the conversation about getting fired from the beginning, where he's talking with the real George.
Yeah, at the club.
It goes on like way too long, and like the only good part of it is when he walks out and smiles, because you stop to think, wait, was that all a bit? Like, was he trying to get fired? Was that the goal?
Right. It starts us on this feeling. Yeah.
But of everything, I think that I don't need that. Edit. Again, I would edit some of the Tony Clifton stuff. The movie goes so Tony Clifton and wrestling heavy. And then I would keep all of the transcendental meditation stuff, and I would actually put in way more about that. The after effects of him getting kicked out, asked not to be a leader, because all that really happened. And I want to see like this thing that was so important to him, you take that away
Yeah.
He doesn't care about bombing. He doesn't care about getting fired or losing Taxi. This is the thing that he cares about. So I wanted to see more of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so I would cut the scene where Andy's actually on the beds with the sex workers.
Mm-hmm.
I would cut that. I understand it's setting us up for, hey, do you want to make a couple of bucks while
Right.
you show up? I would cut that because I want to edit down the Arizona State bit of him reading The Great Gatsby. While I find that funny,
It's amazing.
I felt it went on for too long because I'm trying to make room for other things that we discussed.
Yeah.
Put more of the talk show bits in there. Let's see more of the family. Let's see grandma. And then I am keeping the entire beginning as the closing credits with the record
Yes.
stop and the black screen. I think that is perfection.
Yes.
Yeah.
I agree. So we rate a film as a schmovie, a movie, or a film. We rate it 1 through 5 stars and give our recommendations. You want to go first?
Yeah, sure.
All right. So I wrote down that you were going to rate this 4 stars and a film.
Okay. So I am rating this 4 stars,
Mm-hmm.
but a movie.
Got it.
Because I felt, like I said, the opening and the bed shot to me was film like, but the rest of it felt like a movie. Oh, and I am recommending it. Absolutely. And I think I was talking to Aunt about this, how I'm so much in my Andy research era that I'm trying not to compare it so much. But as a standalone, I feel like it's a really good movie and it gives you a really good taste. And this will lead you, like many of those people said in their
Mm-hmm.
reviews, to research Andy Kaufman.
Yep.
And then to watch the Jim and Andy doc and be like, whoa, Jim Carrey. Wow, 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 wow. So I'm recommending this to everybody.
Yes.
I think
And that's
Jim
the
did a good
benefit
job.
of watching this in 2024 and not 1999 is you can
Right.
literally, as soon as it ends, hop on your phone and learn all this stuff.
Absolutely. Okay, for you, I wrote down that you were rating this 4.5 stars movie.
Very close. Very close. I'm going to say a 4-star movie.
Okay. All right,
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
We
So we
both
ended
are.
up with the same
Yeah.
rating, actually.
Yeah.
I have so much nostalgia for this film. I have so much goodwill towards it. I very much enjoy it. I think it's very funny. Like I said, I think it's a great performance. I don't think it's Andy Kaufman necessarily,
The end all be all,
but
right?
it's still a great experience.
Yeah.
And if you just view it as like a piece of our understanding of who Andy Kaufman is, then I think that's okay.
Yeah.
But yes, if you view it as the Andy Kaufman material, no. And I very much recommend it, especially if you haven't seen Jim Carrey's serious stuff. This is like close to the top for me. And then, yeah, you can go down the Andy Kaufman rabbit hole.
It's a great rabbit hole.
There's something
So
for everybody. There's Taxi,
truly,
there's wrestling, there's stand up,
yep.
there's Captain Duty, Captain
Howdy Doody.
Howdy Doody. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, if this show makes you say howdy doody, we'd love it if you'd give us a rating and a review. I know that was a hard transition, but I'm just going to go with it. Wherever you're listening, give us a rating and a review. Remember, we're still trying to beat Jamie Kennedy's podcast in the amount of reviews that we have on Apple Podcasts. So if you're listening to us there, we'd love it if you could help us out. You can also send us an email, moviefriendspodcast@gmail.com. We got a lot going on, folks. We got people writing articles. We've got all of these Patreon shows happening. We've got our live show coming up in September 21st, Long Island, New York. Send us an email. Let us know how you're connecting with us, what we're doing right, maybe what we're doing wrong. We'll ignore you, but you can still tell us.
I think you can mention we're going to the film festival. What if we have Long Island listeners?
Hey, we're also going to be covering part of the Stony Brook Film Festival
Very
this
exciting.
July. Very
Yeah.
exciting. So that's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Michelle and I, the plate just keeps getting bigger. Like I was going to say the plate keeps getting fuller, but I feel like the plate just gets bigger so that we can fit more on it.
That's a less anxious way to look at it because that
Yeah.
means there's more room. Because it feels like it's just piling up, but let's
Yep.
just make the plate bigger.
That's right.
Okay.
As long as you don't try to carry the plate, you'll be
We
okay.
can't
Just
carry
leave
the
it on the table.
Mine's on the floor right now. I'm
Yeah,
trying
yeah,
not to trip over it.
yeah.
But
But that's okay.
yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
You can also support the show, patreon.com/moviefriendspodcast. You get access to our patron-only Discord, all of our additional episodes and series, which we have a few coming up that I'm super excited about. Just got to say that. And you get to vote on films that we cover each month and monthly themes. Again, that is patreon.com/moviefriendspodcast. So next week, this is my
Yes.
pick for the month. Very excited. We're going to be talking about Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind from 2003, directed by Michel Gondry. It's 108 minutes. It is not currently streaming anywhere, but we're going to hit the new month. All the new stuff comes to streaming. Hopefully by the time this episode comes out, it will be somewhere. And have you seen this?
I have. I had the DVD.
Very nice. Very cool.
It's been a while though. So I
I
look
watched
forward to
this
revisiting it.
recently. Yeah.
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 Nice.
Yeah. It'll be fun.
Yeah.
Jim Carrey, Jim Lai.
Like a different role for Jim. Like
Mhm.
we're like very much doing this very differently, I feel.
Just like Jim Carrey would want it, done differently.
That's right.
I literally feel like my brain is like baking.
Yeah, me too.
Right now, it's so hot. Well, anyway, thanks, Michelle.
Thank you, Seth. I'm so glad we did this.
Me too. This was a good one. Thank you very much for listening. Till next time, have a good one.
Movie Friends is produced by Seth Vargas and Michelle Rubenstein. Music by Anthony Vicora. If you like the show, please subscribe and give us a rating. It really helps us find new friends. Thanks.